I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation are the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students. All 4 had very bright futures. All 4 were great kids. All 4 were viciously stabbed. Here's the story. In the early hours of November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally stabbed to death in their off-campus home. The suspect, who was a former Washington State University criminology grad student, was arrested in December in Pennsylvania. Prosecutors say DNA, cell phone records, and video surveillance ties him to the crime. His trial is now set for this August in Boise after a venue change and includes prosecutors seeking the death penalty. Several witnesses are anticipated: 2 surviving roommates, first responders who discovered the bodies, neighbors, 911 dispatchers, cell tower and digital forensic experts, police, FBI agents, and a DoorDash driver who was making a delivery. Each witness part of a circumstantial case prosecutors are putting together in hopes of convincing a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the suspect is in fact guilty of quadruple murder. This is such a big story and is going to be such a huge trial coming and beginning in August. We know very little. There's been some information released, but there is so much more that will be uncovered and revealed during the course of the trial. And that's because of the Idaho rules and the way they go about with their pretrial release of public information. It doesn't become public until the trial. So we're going to learn a lot more. We know about some of the witnesses. One of those witnesses we believe is going to be the DoorDash driver who made a delivery. And now, all of a sudden, we are hearing about and from that DoorDash driver in the form of a body cam video. Take a look.
You what?
I'm supposed to testify against Bryan next year.
Bryan?
Yep, I killed all the girls over in Moscow.
Well, this won't change any of that.
Yeah, well, there's a DUI on my record.
I think they would be more concerned about the drug use than the DUI.
And then now I have to testify. Big murder case here, so yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case for the college girl.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Bryan.
So you hear what she is saying, both in the back of the cruiser and when she gets back to the station, talking about being a witness in the Idaho case, and mentions that she's a DoorDash driver. And that brings us, I mean, she's on video here because she's on body cam because it looks like she's in custody, which brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight. What happened to the Idaho DoorDash witness? What happened? How did she end up being questioned by police? How does she end up in the back of the cruiser? We're going to need some help with this, so we're going to bring in our guests here to help answer that question. Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas and retired police commander Mike King. He's also the host of the podcast Profiling Evil, and the author of the new book, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. Please check it out. Okay, Cody, I want to begin with you on this one. Let's start with why. Why were the police talking to her? Why did these videos exist?
Well, Vinnie, it's kind of a layered story, and we have to start by noting that the arrest shown on that body cam video took place actually in September of 2024, and she doesn't mention the Idaho student murders case until around 30 to 40 minutes within that body cam video. Now, this whole ordeal started as a regular old traffic stop for expired tags in Pullman, Washington. And Vinnie, you'll remember that Pullman is the location of Washington State University, and that is where the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, was attending school as a PhD student. Now, as far as the DoorDash driver herself, she's been reported, as a 44-year-old woman arrested for allegedly driving under the influence of prescription drugs that she says she was taking due to her ailing body and also her fragile mental state being attached to this high-profile case. Now, we do hear again, she says that she is the DoorDash driver who delivered food to victim Xana Kernodle that night, just minutes before the prosecution says those stabbings took place. Now, this woman's name has not been officially reported into the public record yet, but court documents do have her initials labeled as MM, but not to be confused with MM as in Maddie Mogan, one of the victims in the stabbing. So just wanted to clear the air there. We got two different MMs, but this DoorDash driver's initials are MM. But Vinnie, what I want to do is take another look at the video we just played to really hammer into our viewers what this woman is saying on that body cam video once again. Let's take one more listen.
You what?
I'm supposed to testify against Bryan next year.
Bryan?
Yep, I killed all the girls over in Moscow.
Well, this won't change any of that.
There's a DUI on my record. Let's go.
I think they would be more concerned about the drug use than the DUI.
And
And now I have to testify. Big murder case here, so yeah, because I'm a DoorDash driver, so yeah.
you have to testify in which murder
Murder
case?
case for the college girls.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Bryan there.
And Vinnie, just to clarify here, we of course picked out the 5 biggest statements she made in that bite we just played. Number 1, she says she is the DoorDash driver in the Idaho student murders case. Number 2, she says she will testify in the trial. Number 3, she says she saw Bryan Kohberger at the house. And number 4, Vinnie, this to me is probably the most important one. She says she parked right next to him when she was making that delivery. And lastly, she says she's worried the prosecution will be unhappy about her DUI here.
I'm sure they'll be unhappy. I want to bring Mike King into the conversation. They're not going to be happy, but witnesses are who they are. And this is now part of the story. What did you think of her reaction, Mike, and the fact that she's volunteering this information?
You know, that always troubles me, Vinnie, because she's in the middle of a DUI arrest, and you wonder if she's bringing that up, hoping to garner a little bit of sympathy from the arresting officer. I assume at that point they've conducted a field sobriety test. They have everything that they need to move forward, and then hopefully get a blood test at the jail. But that's always troubling when someone introduces that and does it in a way that might be trying to get a little bit of a deal from law enforcement. And the officer handled it great by saying, hey, this isn't going to change anything, that you're going to still have the opportunity to testify if you are a critical witness to this case. The other thing that kind of jumped out at me, Vinnie, I don't know how you felt or how it came across, but the idea that she's also saying, I'm going to testify against Bryan. Clearly, she's done a lot of listening, researching. Of course, the name is not unfamiliar to anyone who the suspect in the case is and the defendant in this case. But I find that interesting and potentially a real challenge for the prosecution. But I can't think of the number of cases I had where there was somebody who was under the influence of drugs, or they were in the middle of a major criminal enterprise and they still were a valuable witness in a case. And the fact that she can place a car that looks like the suspect vehicle, that she can place an individual who she believes had a physical description that matched. And she now says, and I've learned that is the same guy that I'm seeing here because I remember his face. Those are all pretty powerful things, but still pretty darn sticky, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Cody, I'm curious, does she have any other prior interaction with law enforcement that we know about?
Well, yeah, Vinny, what's interesting is that at the beginning of that body cam video, during her initial police contact with the traffic stop, it was revealed that this is actually not her first DUI, actually in that same vehicle, interestingly enough. Take a listen to this.
What are we doing? What's your name? What are we doing? Well, I was going to ask you if you'd do some voluntary field sobriety tests.
I can do them, but I won't pass them.
Okay, why won't you pass them?
Because I have fibromyalgia, I have arthritis, I have a lot of issues with my body. It's very broken. I have nerve damage.
So the meth in here is not yours?
What meth?
The meth?
Right there.
What are you talking about?
The drugs.
What drugs?
Here's,
Drugs in the car.
to search my truck.
Okay.
What drugs?
No, I was just clarifying.
What drugs?
If there was drugs, they're not yours, right? Okay. Just want to make sure.
Jesus. He's coming.
So
Okay,
the
Mom.
drugs are not yours. Just clarify.
There's still drugs in there.
Okay. There's no drugs. You know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's not my truck.
Okay. Oh, wait. You don't know. Okay.
It's not my truck. I can't. My boyfriend is his truck.
Oh. Well, this is the second time that you've been arrested for DUI out of it.
Said I wasn't arrested last time.
You were.
Oh, great.
We're still waiting on blood results from that one.
I know.
So,
I know.
is there anything illegal in the truck?
Not my truck.
So, Vinny, clearly not her first run-in with police for this specific instance, but the woman was released after her arrest and she has been assigned a court date. But what's interesting about it, Vinny, is that now not only do we have DNA on the knife sheath in the house, we now have potential eyewitness testimony placing Bryan Kohberger at the scene of the crime.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge, huge fact there. Mike King, you know, watching the video, watching the way she is reacting to the situation, I think it's concerning for prosecutors.
Boy, I'm with you, Vinny, and I think it's going to be a real challenge that the defense is going to really, I think, beat up on this witness. But bottom line is she's pretty darn believable. And I think the thing that's going to be most important is at what point did she tell law enforcement that I saw a white car and I saw someone with this physical description outside of the home when I arrived at 7 minutes before this thing was believed to have been started. So I think that's going to be incredibly valuable for them to be able to say, hey, we had this witness tell us this 5 days after the event happened, or when we discovered that there was a DoorDash driver, not when she's at this point where she's completely out of control in the middle of a DUI.
Absolutely. All right, Mike King's going to stick around. Cody Thomas, great work as always. Thank you so much. Coming up next, will the Idaho DoorDash witness arrest impact the prosecution?
Did you actually use drugs?
I told them I took a painkiller.
Brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students.
Oh my God, this doesn't happen here.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger.
You could tell there was some off about him.
He was stalking them. He was hunting them.
Forget about motive. We don't even have a connection.
This trial will be on Court TV.
And I pray that we have justice.
The Idaho College Student Murders Trial. Live coverage begins this August, only on Court TV.
Oh.
So that's the self-identified DoorDash driver from the Idaho student murders case. Crucial witness in the case. She's arrested for DUI, obviously still presumed innocent in all of that, but on body cam talking about it. I want you to take a listen here because she also talks about drug use, but also talks about her husband, and things get even murkier and more complicated in this whole situation. Take a listen.
Did you actually use drugs?
I took a pain pill while over my back.
Okay.
I've been on them for years and years. My husband was murdered in front of me. He was shot 9 times. Our friend.
Where did that happen?
In Moscow.
Who was your husband?
He shot me with it.
Unreal, right? So she's saying that her husband was shot right in front of her. Right in front of her, and now she's a witness in another case, the most notorious case in the country. Unbelievable, but she is being arrested here, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Will the Idaho DoorDash witness arrest impact the prosecution? Here to help us with our investigation, Howard Blum, author of the New York Times bestseller, When the Night Comes Falling, a Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders. Amazing book. The new paperback edition of the book will be published July 1st with a new afterword. Also joining us, retired FBI agent Stuart Fillmore. You can find him on all platforms as Texas Crime Travelers. Thank you both for being here. I'm so happy to have you both here. What are your thoughts here on this latest development? And I'll start with you, Howard. Do you think it's going to impact the prosecution of this case, that you've got this witness who's now been arrested and has seemingly a little bit of a history and has been through a lot?
Well, there are a lot of histories in this case. A lot of the families involved have histories. I think she's going to be a significant witness because look at the only other witness the prosecution has. They have a woman, Dylan Mortensen, who keeps on changing her story a bit, who could not identify a photograph of Bryan Kohberger. But now they have another witness who can confirm what she said, that she saw someone who looked like Bryan Kohberger. I think that's going to help build the case for the prosecution. It's also, they're going to be able to ask her, did you see any other cars in the vicinity? Did you see anyone else there? They are going to be able to use her, they believe, to demolish the alternate perpetrator theory. I think she is a big plus for the prosecution, despite all her problems with who she is and her criminal background.
Yeah, Stuart Fillmore, retired FBI agent. How concerned do you think prosecutors are, and could this impact their case if you have someone like this who is seemingly a very important witness who has some things that she is obviously dealing with, whether it's driving under the influence, painkillers, witnessing the murder of her husband, and also now being arrested?
Yeah, Vinnie, I couldn't agree with Howard more that, she is such a crucial witness here because she actually, puts Bryan at the scene. In 19 years of a 29-year career in the FBI, I mainly worked public corruption cases, which in my area were primarily drug dealers being protected by cops. And you would not be successful at working that type of case without an informant. Well, informants, or at least good informants, they're good for a reason, and that's because they're involved in criminal activity. And so it was a constant thing to have to deal with your witnesses who were, at some point, this same kind of situation would always arise where you had to account for, they got arrested on another charge unrelated to maybe what you're using them for. And it really boils down to is, I don't think that this DUI arrest is really going to hurt her being a witness in the case. It really, I think if they're looking into her background, and I promise you that they are on both sides, prosecution and defense, to see, does she have anything in her background that goes to her credibility, her honesty, and that kind of thing. So has she has she lied before? Has she testified before and lied before? Those are the crucial things. A DUI arrest, it's a minor complication, but not anything that stinks the case.
Yeah. Howard, my concern is looking at her demeanor and the way she is, volunteering that she is a witness in that case, but also she may be dealing with some stuff. I mean, if she witnessed the murder of her husband, that is going to impact you forever. And I'm wondering if it has caused any of the issues that she seemingly is dealing with.
Well, I think it can be fairly well established whether or not she was a DoorDash driver, and if she was there as the timeline shows at 3:59 a.m. Just before the murders occurred, that she made the deliveries. Once that's established, then you have to compare it to Kohberger's alibi. Kohberger says he was off on a wilderness park at that time with his phone turned off and there were no witnesses. Well, now we have two witnesses, however tainted their testimony might be, but they're able to build a narrative that a man who looked like Kohberger, who had bushy eyebrows, was at the scene of the crime at approximately the time when the murders occurred. I think that's going to be very significant for the prosecution, and I think Kohberger's team is going to have a hard time punching holes in these two witnesses.
All right, Howard Blum, Stuart Fillmore are going to stick around. Thank you so much. When we come back, will the Idaho DoorDash witness arrest impact the prosecution? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students who were working hard, going to school, and living their best lives when those lives were taken in the early morning hours inside their off-campus home. Here's the story. It was a chilling November morning in 2022 when the quiet college town of Moscow, Idaho, awoke to horror. Inside a rented home on King Road, 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were found brutally stabbed to death. The timeline is haunting. On the night of November 12th, the victims enjoyed a typical Saturday, a bar, a food truck, a frat party. By 4 a.m., all were home. Between 4 and 4:25 a.m., investigators believe the killer struck silently, sparing 2 surviving roommates. Hours passed. Around noon on November 13th, a 911 call from one of the roommates reported an unconscious person. Police arrived to a grisly scene that shattered the town's sense of safety. A 6-week manhunt followed, ending with the arrest of a criminology PhD student from Washington State University who was back home with his parents in Pennsylvania. Cell data, DNA on a knife sheath, and surveillance footage allegedly links him to the scene. A trial now looms, and the search for justice begins. Timeline is almost everything in this case, in this investigation, putting it together and trying to prove that the suspect is in fact responsible for all of these murders, all that bloodshed. I want you to take a listen. We took a look at a part of the timeline. Take a listen. By 3:30 a.m., everyone is back at home, and a white sedan prosecutors say was driven by the defendant is caught by a neighbor's surveillance camera driving by. 3 minutes later, the same car drives past the house heading out of the neighborhood. Then at 3:38 a.m., the driver does a second drive-by. At 3:56 a.m., the car passes by the house for a third time, in and out of the neighborhood.
These were just girls that went to sleep that night, and he was stalking them, he was hunting them.
At 4 a.m., a DoorDash driver drops off food that Xana Kernodle ordered. At 4:04 a.m., the suspect drives up the street toward the house again. So in tonight's investigation, we're really focusing in on the DoorDash driver. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it's about her. How does the Idaho DoorDash witness fit into this timeline? Gonna need some help with this one. Here to help our investigation, true crime YouTuber Gray Hughes from Gray Hughes Investigates, along with retired police commander Mike King. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Gray, I want to begin with you. And I want to take a look at some of those surveillance videos with the suspect's vehicle allegedly driving around 3:29 a.m. How are you putting together this timeline now with some of this new information?
Well, there were some recent documents that came out that had all of the different times that the vehicle was spotted on surveillance cameras, all the way from, and there was an A&W that it drove by, Ridge Road camera, then it drove up on Taylor Avenue, and the key camera in this case is the 1112 King Road camera. That camera, without that camera, there'd be hard to sort of piece things together. That picked up all kinds of different things, even lights from the vehicle as it drove by. When it came around the back, I mean, we've gone over this before in other episodes, but when the vehicle drives behind 500 Queen Road, as it's coming around to the actual house where the homicides took place, it turns and headlights hit 1127 King Road, which 1112 King Road was filming. So you can actually see as the car is turning just by the lights, and then it parks. Now, the thing is on pass number 1, 2, 3, and 4, the first pass, there's a minute 43 time frame where as it turns to park behind there before it leaves driving by the 1112 King Road camera. And that means the car stopped for about a minute 10 back there, maybe looking through Madison Mogan's window. Then on pass number 2 was 49 seconds, and then on pass number 3, 56 seconds, and the last one was 13 minutes. But even pass number 2 and 3, the car stopped for about 30 seconds or so because it does not take that long. It takes maybe 15 to 20 seconds to drive that distance. So it's really interesting when you see it all laid out in a timeline.
You know, I thought you laid it out really well on your YouTube channel. I want the folks at home to take a look at that, and I want Mike to take a look at it as well. Let's watch.
Kohberger's parked right there. And here is the DoorDash driver. Let's move this piece. So they drive in, come around, and then at 3:57:50, parks right there. And she parked next to him. There he is. So he drove by right here at 3:58:23, and then he drove out, and then he drove around like this, and he's watching that DoorDash vehicle. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know it's a DoorDash delivery. And then he drives around like this and does a U-turn because it's concerning to him. And then he comes back up here and he looks over there.
So a big part of all this is her saying that she saw him, that she parked next to him. So Mike, from your perspective, do you think this is all happening in the front of the house, that lot that we see in the front? Because if I'm a DoorDash driver, that's where I would go.
You know, it's good to be on with Gray because we've had a lot of discussions where we pulled out maps and we've looked at things and talked about things, and what a great job he's done here. But the thing that's so important, I think, in this is the prosecution needs to get across the point that as she's exiting her vehicle to make that DoorDash delivery, if in fact all of this story is true, and he is now trying to leave this area, he's going to be on the driver's side of that vehicle, and the only thing separating him from her is a little bit of distance and a glass window, if that window's up. And so she's got a clear view into that vehicle, which I think the prosecution could make a lot of hay in. And then when we start putting this thing together, I mean, again, we're dealing with such an incredible circumstantial case. All of these pieces keep putting more and more responsibility on Bryan Kohberger, that he has to somehow, or his defense team has to somehow get people to believe, well, maybe that's not correct, or have them think that something else may have happened. But when we start looking at the forensics that are coming in from the cameras capturing this vehicle that is the same kind of vehicle that Kohberger is driving, at least in color and size and shape. We see a DoorDash driver who says, I'm physically looking into the eyes of this person. We see the forensics that's putting him in the area, him personally, based on his phone earlier than that. All of these pieces start coming together, and these are the kinds of cases where I think, Vinnie, you as a prosecutor would have been really happy to start tying together to help the jury, reasonable people, make a decision that, yeah, this guy's got to be the one that's right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They need every piece of evidence possible. We see it in case after case. Gray, I just want to clarify, where do you believe that they potentially parked next to one another? And at what point it's not at the point where he is about to go in the house, right? It would be before that, because he's making all these different passes.
You know, it's interesting because if she sat around for 7 minutes after the delivery, she could have seen him getting ready, prepping. You know, I think he did some blood spatter mitigation techniques near the car before he went into the house. She could have seen that. But I think the time that makes the most sense is on pass number 3, between 3:57:27 when the Elantra turns, and then it parks somewhere around like 3:58. And if she was already there, I know she used the term that she parked next to him, but it could just be, you know, that's just in general that she was, so let's say she was already parked there and got there at 3:57 and just didn't deliver it until 3:59, sat in her car for a couple of minutes. Then he comes down and parks. He might not notice her there, you know, at that time, but maybe her lights were on. But I think it's going to be between 3:57:27 and 3:58:23 when they passed each other or were next to each other, because at 3:59:04, he's already left and driving away. But that's also only 37 seconds from the time she delivers the meal. And I think it's right there in that front parking area. And he's on that side road, and she's right next to him, just slightly down a little bit in the parking lot. So it's really, it's amazing. There's a lot of different options, but I think the one that makes the most sense is pass number 3, because that's right at, you know, within a minute of the time she delivers the DoorDash.
Yeah, Mike King, and the way we've been getting information here, we've gotten so little information, which is fine. You know, investigators are the ones who need it, and prosecutors are the ones who need it during the trial. As the trial plays out, we're going to learn so much more. But this was a huge piece of the puzzle from the beginning. We were always wondering, what about the DoorDash driver? And now it seems like this is a very significant part of the case, a very significant part of the story that prosecutors are going to need to tell.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's something that's really critical here. There's only a distance maybe of 15 feet between that drive and where the DoorDash driver potentially parked. Again, a very short space of time and space. But when they bring out the actual digital records from DoorDash, I mean, we've all ordered food and we watch that driver drive up the street and stop and walk in and hand us our food. They're going to be able to, using the telemetrics from the phone itself that DoorDash driver's using, not triangulated data like we've talked about in the past, Vinnie, but actual location data from the device. They're going to be able to show that DoorDash driver pulling right into that area, stopping and getting there almost within seconds, just like we see when we're waiting for our food. And I hope that the defense or the prosecution makes an argument like that of, hey, you've all looked out the window waiting for the DoorDash driver, watching your phone as they drive up the street. And it's almost always dead on when they arrive, and that's going to be powerful.
Yeah, and I think the significance of the timestamp, is it after the delivery? Is it before the delivery? I'm not sure how they do that. Gray, do you know when DoorDash declares the time? Is it after the delivery is made?
There's some people that are DoorDash drivers that say they can actually say it's delivered, but not deliver it at that exact point in time. What's interesting, maybe another show, but at 3:59 is in the documents where it shows that it was delivered. However, there's a key fob sound on the 1330 Linda Lane camera at 3:59, 46, 48, 51, you know, when you're locking your door. And then about 35 seconds later, it's unlocking the door. So that almost feels like that's the time that she went to the house to deliver the meal. So there's a little variance there.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Big thank you. Gray Hughes Investigates. Check it out on YouTube. Mike King, Wolves in Sheep's Clothing, the new book. Thank you so much. Still to come, how important is the Idaho DoorDash witness?
Coming soon to Court TV.
It's the biggest story that we're covering.
These murders have shaken our community.
He is the boogeyman.
So many eyes have been on Donna Adelson from the beginning. It's terrible. A social media sensation, now a suspected killer.
Why do you have something against me?
She wrote a children's book about her husband's death. Now she's accused of killing him.
The high-stakes trials you don't want to miss. Coming soon, only on Court TV.
911 location of your emergency.
Something is happening. Something's happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
And tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she not wake me up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night.
The 911 call, heartbreaking and devastating in many levels, but there's other parts of it that give us some insight into the confusion of the night for some of the really important people in this case, who are the surviving roommates, including Dylan, who I think is really crucial in all of this. Let me remind you, put this up on the screen. This was part of her statement, one of her statements that she made. She said that she saw a figure clad in black clothing and a mask that covered the person's mouth and nose walking towards her. Imagine how scary that was. Dylan described the figure as 5'10" or taller, male, not very muscular, but athletically built. And then everyone has been focusing in on the final part of that description with bushy eyebrows. And we see that's important because you look at the suspect and you look at his eyebrows, and that's one of the first things that you may notice. You know, the build also matches him, but the eyebrows, significant part of the description, I thought, in all of this, like a very, very important part of the description, which makes her an extremely important witness. And you know how tough it's going to be for her to testify. She survived all of this and apparently saw him walking towards her, now knowing what she knows about what happened to her roommates. So there's another witness who also says that she saw the suspect, not inside the house, but outside, which is the DoorDash witness, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. How important is the Idaho DoorDash witness? How crucial? Let's bring back in our guest to help us with all of this. Howard Blum, who is the author of When the Night Comes Falling, a Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders, and Stuart Fillmore, retired FBI agent. Stuart, I'll begin with you. Let's talk about this, because it's got to be a description that she had to give at some point to investigators. I would think that the timing of that description and how it does or does not match with Dylan's description will be crucial in all of this.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't know exactly when the police first talked to the DoorDash driver and the information that she gave, you know, in that initial interview. What I hope comes out of it is that, you know, at the time she says she saw him. She specifically named, she says, "I saw Bryan park right next to me." I'm hoping that maybe there was something at the time that triggered her to think something's not right here, something that set off her radar, that she maybe contemporaneously recorded that, documented it somehow. that strengthens her credibility and, makes her a better witness.
Absolutely. And Howard Blum, this has been one of those mysteries. We've heard about her. Now we're seeing her. For her to be able to identify him, and I'm wondering how specific her recollection was. I wonder if they had a suspect, they made an arrest, if they showed her a photo array before any of us saw her. To me, all of that is so important in all this and would absolutely be directly correlated to the importance of her testimony.
Yes, indeed. But first of all, we just saw some surveillance video before. We saw the white car driving through the neighborhood. In all those shots, there wasn't one of a license plate. There wasn't one photograph of anyone behind the wheel. So all we have of who could be behind the wheel is that DoorDash driver. And that makes her very significant in building this case. The Kohberger team is going to try to tear her to pieces. They can impugn her, they can impugn her character, but if she sticks to her testimony, I think she's going to be very effective and very important because she helps reinforce Dylan Mortenson's identification. And let's also bear in mind that Dylan Mortenson's investigation is a mercurial one. She first identified Kohberger, then she didn't, then she couldn't point him out from a photograph she was shown, so it keeps on changing. So every time she equivocates Dylan, I think the DoorDash driver's importance becomes intensified.
And Stuart, Howard makes such a great point here, right? Because we've got all this surveillance video of this white Elantra that we were looking for, and they can pinpoint the location of the Elantra, but you need to put the suspect behind the wheel. She's the one that can potentially do that.
I agree completely. You have a lot of circumstantial, compelling evidence against Bryan beyond just the car. You have the geofencing, you have, the phone data, all that kind of stuff that is pretty compelling, the DNA, all these other things. I think you could make the case without the DoorDash driver. You could make a, compelling case, but I think she puts it over the top. If there is any reasonable doubt to be had, I think she puts it beyond that and will ultimately be part of getting a successful conviction here.
Yeah, so along those lines, Howard, we hope everything is okay with her psychologically, mentally, and knowing how important she will be for this case.
Yes, and also I can hope, or I can imagine, that the defense will ask her, did you see anyone else in the neighborhood? Now, they'll have the answer to this before they ask the question, of course. But when she says, I didn't see anyone else, they will refute tacitly the defense team's theory about alternate assailants, that the knife sheath was planted in the bedroom, that only one person did it. She can testify. She's the one witness who can testify that no one was in the area.
Big thank you to Howard Blum and Stuart Fillmore. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And as we conclude, being a witness in a high-profile trial, not easy, folks. Just ask some of the folks who testified in either one of Karen Reed's trials. Sometimes it can turn your life upside down. But when the stakes are so high and you have important information, you have to be a part of the case, regardless of the impact. Let's just hope the men and women who testify in Idaho are given a fair shake and help the jury find the truth and deliver justice. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.